which ultimately is a mirror of love. That's why in the Shinto religion, and Shinto is Shintao, Tao is the universal flow of the being, Shen is the gods. So the flow of the gods is Shinto religion. And their most holy thing is the mirror, which is behind me, by the way. And the mirror is is the kind of moment when the dialectic is seen through and both halves come together and make a completeness, a wholeness. Anyway, to cut a long story short, and this is so exciting, Chinese medicine was very, very profound, and it dealt with the whole bigger picture of things. So the great doctors of Chinese civilization, which are listed in this wonderful book, The Web Has No Weaver, included Qi Bo, who was the teacher of the Yellow Emperor, who was one of the greatest sages of Chinese history. And he taught a particular method of healing. And he said there are 3 kinds of healing. And I'm sharing this because to me Brexit is like the catastrophe of our country, the breakup, the polarisation of our country, the Scots rightly feeling so unloved they're going to take off and do their own thing, and who can blame them? The Northern Irish just panicking, not knowing what to do because they know the time of troubles is coming back. And all because the DUP didn't have the brains to work out they should have been opposing Brexit all this time and not facilitating it. If they'd been proper unionists, they would have from day one been saying, Northern Ireland voted against Brexit, folks, we don't want it. Well, they're finally waking up a bit late. So what do? Panic. Okay, healing, folks. We do healing. What this guy Qi Bo would do if he was, asked by Sir David Tredennick to come and help heal the chaos of Brexit using complementary Chinese medicine, he would say, okay, there are 3 ways of doing this. First, we do a diagnosis. We look at the history of the illness. In this case, it's a social illness, so we look at all the fake news, the people that were arrogant, the people that don't care about truth. They literally, people like Dominic Cummings don't care about truth. They just want power. The soul, the heart, we would say in English, has gone from them. He's like a robot taken over by just power demons, it seems to me, and all his cronies. And Boris Johnson and that cabinet you see sitting down, the Priti Patel woman who will lie just to advance her career, and all the others, unbelievably scandalous. So, okay, diagnosis, the whole thing. Nigel Farage, all his cronies. Diagnosis. Then, the second level is you prescribe medicines, herbs, massage, acupuncture, pills, the whole thing. So we can treat everybody in that practical way. That's how Chinese medicine operates. But Qi Bo said, okay, but then there's a 3rd level of cure, there's a 3rd level of healing. And this has a particular technical name in Chinese. It's called Tong Shen Ming. Shen is divine, and it means penetrating divine illumination. This is for really difficult cases when I've met patients who they've got a whole bunch of ills that would fill up a dossier of 10 foolscap pages, and they've seen 20 doctors, they've got all these different symptoms, and they've had all these drugs prescribed, and now they've got side effects from these drugs and side effects from those drugs, and all the doctors are doing are keeping them one step ahead of the game to stave off the last load of side effects, and nobody knows what was originally wrong with them, but there are lots of patients like that. The NHS doesn't know what to do with them, but it just keeps pumping them with drugs, and then eventually they get so toxified that they die off. It's tragic, but this is what's happening. Well, what Qi Bo would do is, by working the doctor, a truly trained, proper sage doctor, who studied all the other forms of healing over many years and has met thousands of cases, he or she, when brought this patient, and they have just a brief interview or conversation, he will know at once, using this gift of penetrating divine illumination, what the cause of that thing is. Going right back, it could be a karmic thing, it could be a spiritual thing. He'll be now working at a supernatural level. because the penetrating divine illumination means exactly that. It's when the Shen energy, which is the divine nature of the patient, speaks directly to the divine nature of the doctor. Telepathically, they won't say it in words, they can't. Their soul will say it. Look, the reason I'm like trembling and can't speak and blah blah is because X, Y, Z. Their heart will say it. And the practice of penetrating divine illumination means the doctor can then reassure the patient and speak back to them at that same level and effect a cure. Because what's going on with this illness is this whole complex accumulation of karmic causation, which then led to that tragedy, that breakdown. Once that is understood, once a gnosis happens, the diagnosis, which means the gnosis, the knowledge that flows between patient and doctor, can then get recirculating. and at that point, the divine penetrating illumination can come in. Shen does the healing. The doctor does nothing. Shen acts as the mirror to the patient's perplexity and pain and anxiety, so that then the patient becomes miraculously well of themselves and they feel they've done it themselves. Or Shen has come into them in such a way that it's happened. Now, this is what the highest form of Chinese medical practice is. And what I'm saying is that's what we need about Brexit. You see, we don't need to have the conversation just at the level of diagnosis. We've done that. We know what caused this. And of course, the Brexiteer fanatics simply can't listen to that. They don't realise they are the cause of it. Then we have the level of cure, well, truth-telling in Parliament, authentic education, holistic joined-up thinking, a philosophy club in Parliament, voting down Boris Johnson's deal, having a second referendum, having a general election. These are all like therapeutic things that can be done, and I sincerely hope they will. But the highest level of cure is this penetrating divine illumination. And that is what I'm sharing as a philosopher and as a metaphysician. That's the level I'm operating on. And that's what we need in Britain and my beloved Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. This is what we need a wake up, once again, to the fact that we've got in such a muddle, such a mess, that only that Shen download can save us. Literally. Now that's the level at which saints operate. That's what I'm talking about. We have to invoke the saints to save our country, because it has got to the point where we've so screwed up. And like in that wonderful Rob Lacey quote from the Sermon on the Mount, I tell you who'll still be laughing. The people who know about grief, who don't shove the mess behind the sofa, but face it. God himself is going to put his arm around them. Now, obviously, Rob died long before Brexit, but, he was up against the struggle between ignorance and truth and wisdom. And in that wonderful translation, he's saying that if we acknowledge the grief that Brexit has caused, the pain, the intense pain it's caused to people, relationships, friendships, our relationship with Europe, the anger and correct disgust of the Scots and the Northern Irish and so on. Well, if we acknowledge that pain, that grief, well, we have to then face it. We don't shove the mess behind the sofa. We face it. And that's the intellectual courage that comes from this invoking the energy of Shen, the divine illumination, which is the only level that can deal with this level of stupidity. So anyway, I would commend people to study this concept of penetrating divine illumination and to reflect on how we can bring that higher level of thought into the conversation. I'd like to see Justin Welby and the other spiritual elders of Britain leading that conversation. I've actually written to all the theological colleges of the British Isles, offering to come and teach a course on Bremain and Brexit from a theological perspective, looking at the Gospels in detail and seeing what light that tradition can shed on this catastrophe. So that's an ongoing work, and I'm recording a talk on saints' days from the different Gospels. Then we have the question of ignorance. Again, it's part of the diagnosis is, I mean, a good doctor will ask the patient, well, what, how did you break your leg? Oh, well, I was jumping off roofs 60 feet high and I thought that was a good idea. Well, that's ignorance. It's ignoring the consequences of something. And I think Britain has ignored the consequences of its Brexit fantasy for too long. In the Chinese philosophical tradition, where they combine Taoist, Confucian and Buddhist ideas, there's a very sophisticated discussion been happening for over 1,000 years about karma and its consequences. And I commend that conversation to people that are thinking through the consequences of Brexit. I gave a talk at the Theosophical Society headquarters in London back in January. Theosophy has tried to stimulate that conversation about causality and karma. Alice Bailey has written about it in her extension of Theosophical Insights. But, we need to update this. Now, this scripture written in the 6th century AD is called Scripture on the Causes of Karmic Retribution. And it combines Taoist and Buddhist thought. We need to reflect on this, because every action has a reaction. If people are sitting there at home, I hate the European Union, I hate those bloody French, I hate the Germans, whatever, hate. Well, it's going to have karmic retribution. You seriously need to put hate away and think about love, taking that up as another option. So I want to celebrate the fact that we're coming up. It's the 27th of October. We're coming up in the next few days of bumpy ride when hopefully, Brexit will be blocked, suspended, postponed, and we'll get an extension to stay in the European Union for all the reasons I've given. And then we come to Samhain, the Druid New Year, and I want to just celebrate and commemorate that. It will happen, on the 31st of October, the 1st of November, and this was the Celtic New Year when we celebrate the old going. I would like us to be able to celebrate the old Brexit narrative being finally blocked, or at least a route being opened up whereby it will be blocked. And I commend all the sincere parliamentarians of all kinds, Caroline Lucas for the Greens, Joe Swinson for the Lib Dems, and Chaka Amuna and all the other great campaigners for Remain that are there, and also all the vast majority of Labour MPs that have stood up against this complete right-wing nightmare, and including Jeremy Corbyn, who's finally joining the Remain team at last. He thought he could bring his hard Brexiteer Labour types with him. He can't. He's got to let them go. Some of them are threatening to join the Brexit Party. Let them go, Jeremy. They don't deserve to have the Labour badge anymore. They've sold out the country. All these people I salute, the SNP people. I'm utterly awed by Ian Blackford's rhetorical gravitas and his intellectual mastery of the nonsense the Tories are trying to do, and also his Joanna Cherry, a brilliant QC and a great legal mind. Again, thank you for what you've done to save the UK from self-destruction. And all your colleagues, the younger SNP members, I take my hat off to you. And if these stupid Brexiteers, I think you are going to get an independent Scotland. Absolutely, you deserve it. The only question is whether we will stay in the European Union, which is what I sincerely hope. And the UK, Scotland goes amicably like Slovakia did from Czechoslovakia. There's no other solution, I don't think. Okay, so I want to finish by saying that why does it matter? So what? I hate things. I hate French, Let me just get on with my Brexit hating. I don't care, I know people that are full of hate and hating the European Union. They just hate life generally. And so for them, Brexit is just another extension of that hatred. And so what? What right have you got to tell me any different? I've had this a lot as a teacher, why are you teaching me? I don't want to know anything. Well, I have a duty. This is what being a professor or a professional or an academic or an educator is about. I, have a duty to teach, because your attitude, your hatred, is destroying my country and my civilization and my culture. So, that hating, I would really seriously ask people to take a long look at the effect on yourself and on your country and on the future. And I want to say that, you see, life, according to the latest metaphysics and physics, life is made up of waves. As I'm speaking, I'm using sound waves. You see my image with light waves. I'm physically here, but I'm made of waves, right? This book is called The Wave Watcher's Companion. I love this book. Gavin Pretor Pinney. It's like how to spot different waves, both on the sea, sound, light. It describes how waves move. Sound waves travel about 3,430 miles an hour through seawater, over 4 times as fast as through air, etc. It's full of fascinating snippets about the functioning of waves, right down to X-rays and thought waves. Now the point is that everything we think, do, touch, feel, etc. is interconnected. The Buddhists and Taoists knew this. They worked it out experientially, that if I speak loving words here in the middle of France, give good thoughts out, that spreads like a wave. And if other people are doing the same, that acts as an energy boost. And gradually we can spread that love wave around Europe, around Britain, around the world. And we can, like a tsunami of joyism, right, replace the hatred waves that are being pumped out. Because those hatred waves, which are about racism, arrogance, hubris, superiority, are just like little waves that have got into a turbulence. They're like whirlpools. And the truth workers on the planet, the satyagrahis, have to come together, hold hands etherically at a distance. You don't have to physically do it, but it's nice if you do sometimes. And create a wave of joy and bliss and wisdom, like an enlightenment wave. That's what Marianne Williamson is trying to do in California. It's what I'm trying to do here in Europe. It's what my colleagues in throughout Britain, Scotland. This book I bought in Orkney, which to me is the most beautiful part of Britain. I love it. And when I went across on the ferry to Orkney, do it sometime, you see the incredible long waves that have come in off the Atlantic. And each one is like, 100, 200 meters before the next crest. That's because they've crossed the Atlantic. And there they meet the North Sea. And what we learn from the studying of waves is that everything is interconnected. That's why we need to stay together, celebrate togetherness and interconnectedness, celebrate universality. And that's why Kant said we should act in such a way that if everyone acted that way, it would augment everybody's universal peace, happiness and enlightenment. That's the Kantian ethic for the work I'm doing as a peace philosopher here in Europe and Britain. And it's kind of a form of magic, because the magician creates in the microcosm the narrative, the effect they want in the macrocosm, and then it's spread by waves, angel waves, whatever you want to call it. Well, that's how reality works. And I would like to see a Europe premised on the peace waves, which hopefully we could create such a beauty resonance field that we could help our dear friends in Syria and in Israel and Palestine and other conflict regions like Libya to get onto the same vibrational wavelengths so that they can make peace among themselves and realize that there's nothing more beautiful and incredible than an Israeli or a Palestinian. They're both incredibly amazing people. Look at our dear friend Frumentius from the Lebanon, another great culture. Every place is a node on the wavelength of enlightenment, beauty and love. And there's no kind of rivalry between that. But they're all interconnected. And so that the stupidity ultimately, the metaphysical stupidity of Brexit, is thinking you can sort of jump off the beach and get away somewhere. No, we're here. It's one great sea of enlightenment. Let's learn to swim in it, celebrate it joyously with our European friends, allies, co-workers, fellow light workers, lovers, wisdom lovers. We're all doing this together. We're like seals, in the sea off Bardsey Island, where I've been in Wales, or Iona. What nationality are the seals? Well, they belong to the goddess, to the gods, as do we all. And on that note, I want to end with a poem or two, because sometimes the waves can only be explained in poetry. And that's why I became a poet at the age of 13, like Tagore. And I've been trying to, articulate the inarticulate ever since. I'm going to read firstly one of mine, and no, I think I'm going to start with Rumi's, because he's better known than me, and this is one of, I think, his greatest ever poems. And I'm going to comment on that poem, and then I'll finish with my little poem to end. Okay, this poem is called After Being in Love, the Next Responsibility. Turn me like a water wheel, turning a millstone. Plenty of water, living water. Keep me in one place and scatter the love. Leaf moves in a wind, straw drawn towards amber. All parts of the world are in love, but they do not tell their secrets. Cows grazing on a sacramental table, ants whispering in Solomon's ear, mountains mumbling an echo, sky calm. If the sun were not in love, he would have no brightness. The side of the hill, no grass on it. The ocean would come to rest somewhere. Be a lover as they are, that you may come to know your beloved. Be faithful, that you may know faith. The other parts of the universe did not accept the next responsibility of love as you can. They were afraid they might make a mistake with it. The inspired knowing that springs from being in love. Now, I love that poem by Rumi, translated by Coleman Barks. To me, I've been to Konya, where Rumi his physical body is there, and I took my daughter Sophia there, a musician and lover of the muses. And we both love Rumi, and what this poem is about is plugging into that cosmic love, that wave vibration that underlies joyism. And yet, beyond that, it's not enough just to feel that love. You have to, as a human, we have to also use our reason, our mind, our intellect. The special knowing, the inspired knowing that springs from being in love. So this is my message, really, to those people out there who, and I know some good people who practice very deep mysticism, they get tuned into the heart energy, and they kind of lose their contact with intellect and reason a bit, and they've ended up thinking Brexit's a good idea because they've never thought it through. They just sort of tune in and it seems a good idea. These are sort of mystic types who are actually against intellectuals, against reason, and against thinking. Now, with all due respect, I find they're very sweet and I like them, but I'm trying to also address them to wake up out of that heart-only school, because actually we have a heart-mind. The heart is the bass drum that beats away the rhythm, but the mind does the thinking of the particulars. The mind is the strings, the solo instrument, the piano, whatever. You can't just have the drum to make the orchestra. Beethoven, had the heart which powers the awesome solemnity of the music, and then the genius of the mind of Beethoven writes the notes down that becomes the symphony, or whoever else. So we need heart and mind to both engage to stop Brexit. And when you do, I assure you, pump the heart up, get it going, flow the love, pump the brain up, get the intellect switched on, study some philosophy. You'll realise what a horror and a nightmare this is from both a heart and a mind perspective. So anyway, that's my Rumi comment on what we need, which is not just love alone, it's the next responsibility, the inspired knowing that comes from that. Now I'm going to finish with one of my own little poems. This is just poem 477. It's, I'm not going to comment on it because you have to work out its meaning, but I'll just give you a hint that it's something to do with bees, which were a symbol of the Samoon Brotherhood, the universal order. The Sufi mystic Gurdjieff talks about them. The bee is the symbol of wisdom. Napoleon liked bees, so did the Merovingian monarchs. The bee is a universal symbol of wisdom, and they're perishing. We need to. That's why another reason the European Union is good for us, because it's helping with environmental law. It will help about global warming. It will help with the destruction of nature that capitalism, unbridled capitalism, has caused. Ever since Rachel Carson's book, The Silent Spring, first pointed out the horrors of chemical leakage into the environment. And so those people that want Brexit because it'll lead to less regulation, less environmentalism and more capitalism and greed, these people they need to get some inspired knowing going and do some work, talk to Caroline Lucas about environmental problems. So this poem is on behalf of the bees. Report on the common work. We searched together for a common light. We triangulated across eons of time-space, weavings for common signs. We flew, dressed in brown and gold, humming, drawn by a common scent. We spin and dive through the blue rush of ether at morning and sunset. Both ends of our being tapered in bliss. Resounding with a common life, we grow slowly, pushing tentative tendrils and branches of being, unfurling leaves as if no one will notice or mind. Searching for a common life, we age and grow cold and enter the grave, still smiling, into the place before time was, and we pin the bubble of thought down to the start point and start dancing, searching for a magic, even older than love, that can rise us up out of mere desire to a place of completion. We scan the sky for signs, and we find light, gushing like spring flowers in darkness, shimmering forth their jeweled promises. We search for a common answer as we ask a myriad of questions, fragmented into all possible nuances of doubt. And we find only the gasp of wonder when the answer finally caws at us like a crow with rough diamond, coal black beauty.